Welcome back to the Pastor's Podcast.
Welcome back, Scott.
Welcome back, Scott.
After I think this is the longest hiatus in the history of the Pastor's Podcast.
That is saying something, because the Pastor's Podcast that was here in 1903 was
since its inception.
This
is the longest break we've ever had.
Longest hiatus.
But I think usually when podcasts that are as regular as the Pastor's Podcast go on a hiatus this long,
right,
they never come back.
That's true. That's probably true.
They just don't. But we're back.
We're back.
Defeating the odds.
We're back defeating the odds. Brian, what do you have to say about that?
I think everyone's excited to hear about how we're back.
I'm wondering if Scott can spell hiatus. That's actually what's going through my mind.
I think it's a silent G, right?
Yeah, silent G.
It's like hiatus.
High eight.
Us. Wow.
This is the
This
concept.
is what everyone
What an empty life you've
has
had.
been
4 months.
missing.
People have been waiting for
4
this.
months of
That's
an empty
right.
life without this kind of witty banter. What have you done with yourself?
Okay, I need to set the record straight.
Yeah.
It was a 3-month sabbatical.
3+.
It was a 3-month sabbatical.
When was your first
Basically.
week
I think
off?
it was 16 weeks.
16 week. It was unprecedentedly
Are you
long.
including the conference that I spoke at the end and at the beginning so that I wasn't actually off? Is that...
Well, I don't know. When we were
It might have been
counting how
16
long
weeks
you
with
preached
that.
on Sunday, did we not count the prayer at the end or the introduction at the
This
beginning?
is such inside baseball.
What qualifies for a sermon length time?
It was only unprecedentedly long, his sabbatical, by like 1 or 2 weeks, not 3 or 4 weeks.
And those 2 weeks were filled with other kinds of ministry related things. So it's
don't know.
it's very much a joke.
Matt keeps calling it a 6-month sabbatical, and I'm just getting a little bit insecure here.
Yeah, it's we'll see. We'll
It
see how
felt
the
like
next
that.
few see how the next few months go. We'll see what you accomplish in the next 3 months, and we'll consider it
Just
still
felt
a
I
like
sabbatical.
time was that,
Was this
that
still-
slow without you.
That's right.
That's why it's a compliment from Matt.
I appreciate that.
It
I
actually
appreciate
it went pretty fast. It went pretty fast in my mind. Scott's back already?
that. Wow.
Wow.
That was quick. So since
We're happy you're back.
I'm
Just to
very-
clarify, there's
you're
a lot
happy
of
I'm back, or
sarcasm.
I'm happy I'm back.
Well, I don't know about you. I can't speak for you. I'm
Despite
happy
me
you're
turning
back.
what Matt said into a compliment and then him inverting it so it became a criticism
That's
again.
what I'm trying to say. I have to
He
clarify.
is still happy to be
because
back.
Brian turned it into a compliment. I turned it into a criticism. I meant it I'm bringing it back around. Compliment. We're happy you're back.
It's good to be
Welcome back.
It's good to be back. So I've been, well, I mean, I guess you guys are right, basically. I've only been back at the office for a week and a half at this point. And it was really nice to preach on Sunday. It's been nice just to get to connect. But the question I keep getting was like, how is the summer? Like, how is the time? Like, what's the Lord been teaching you over the summer? And I kind of want to flip the tables a little bit, because I keep getting this question, but it's not like, the Lord stood still around here. I would love to hear about what the Lord's been teaching you guys over the summer. I'd love to hear what's been going on. I mean, what I miss, guys. Yeah, I'd love to just hear how, maybe I wouldn't just love to hear. I think the people, all 13 of our subscribers.
Hey, is it only 13?
No,
Oh, okay.
it's more than that.
You say a specific number, you make me wonder.
How have you guys been seeing God working over the last few months?
How was your summer, Matt?
My summer was pretty good. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on. Well, I think in terms of church and what God's doing here, I think there's a lot of new people getting connected to the church, which is pretty cool. So if you're new listening to the Pastor's Podcast, welcome. We're glad that you're here. Maybe you're new to Cornerstone. At this time of year in LA, there's always a lot of people who are moving in.
Yeah.
And so a lot of that has been just getting to meet some new people, hearing news stories, and getting to help people connect and find ways to exercise their gifting and connect in community. And I've been so blown away and grateful for the opportunity to meet a lot of the new people. So in terms of like the church as a organization and church as a body of people, that's one of the things that has stood out to me is just a lot of new people. And so, yeah, I don't know. We're excited if you're here, if you're new listening to this, we're excited that you're here, excited about what God is going to do. We believe God builds his church through his word, through his people, through the Spirit moving in the lives of his people. And God ordained circumstances, and you're here. God has ordained your circumstances to be here and be a part of what God's doing. So, yeah, I that was one of the things that stood out to me on a personal level.
Yeah.
I mean, on a personal level, one of the things I've been reading through like Old Testament narratives more. So I was going through 1st and 2nd Samuel, thinking about David. And the thing that maybe stood out to me about David, amongst many other things, is how patient he was. Like his story is pretty, like you kind of like he's said he's going to be king, yada yada yada. Samuel's there, and then like Saul just keeps coming after him, even after like he, how many times does he cut off a piece of his clothing and like he's in a cave? Like it's like, is this a repeat of the story? He over and over again, like through so many trials, he's just so faithful. So it's just a really interesting. I mean, obviously, as things go on, different things happen. But in the early part of David's life, I was just struck by how patient he was for God to work. He heard God's promise. He knows that God's going to keep his promise. But there's this long extended time, and I was just thinking about that in terms of my own life and patience in my own life with whatever God has for me in the future. So that's one of the things I was thinking about this summer that struck me a lot. Just
Super
Old
cool.
Testament narratives.
That's super encouraging. How was this summer for your family?
It was good.
Yeah,
It was
I
good.
mean, we're in like the middle of October. I'm talking about like this, you guys are, everybody's like, yeah, and like they're halfway. It's like the coming up on finals week.
Yeah. People listening to this and like putting up their Christmas tree.
Yeah, totally.
Summer for the family was good. I mean, it's another consistent year of God's faithfulness, and had some really good extended time together as a family in different ways. And
That's cool.
The biggest thing we did was we had our first international trip. The 6 of us went to Mexico City, which was really cool. But I don't know. I don't think people want to hear about that, except we had good time as a family.
No, but I mean, we
great
do like an
food.
update, but I think it's like it's cool to see the opportunities those are and the time that is for your family. I mean, because how many of your kids speak Spanish now?
I mean, Owen and Zoe are pretty fluent. Caleb and Bailey are learning just because of school, but Mexico City was just an incredible place. Really green. I'm a big advocate because I loved it. But I like to travel in general, but I loved it. Very green, very safe, very walkable, a lot of fun, great food, great architecture, nice people. So
super cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Got to eat a lot of insects. So if that's your thing, I think that's going to be the future of the world anyway. So you get used to it.
It's good to prepare now.
Man.
Oh man.
So Brian, you both, I think, organizationally with the church and with the preaching load and everything like that, you carried quite a load this summer.
I felt your absence.
Yeah.
I definitely felt your absence.
So let me publicly say thank you.
It was my pleasure. Matt's jaunting around Mexico City.
Just like tacos in my mouth everywhere. I ate as many tacos as you preached sermons, which was a lot.
Like 7 tacos. No, I mean, it was definitely a lot to do, but I had a blast. I had a blast this summer. I love this church. I think you guys, your youngest kids have always been, since we've had kids, older than my youngest kids. And so I think as my family situation has changed, I've had more kind of flexibility to be able to fill in gaps, like when Scott's gone. And so being able to stretch those wings and take care of the church in your absence with Matt and Jose and Ara and the other pastors was great. I really enjoyed it. 1 Corinthians was phenomenal. Ending in 1 Corinthians 15, doing like 5 sermons on the resurrection. it was great for my soul. I think it was good for us as a church. And just in general, from the family meeting to different ways of looking ahead to the future, I just left the summer feeling very excited about where our church is. Very excited about the new people, about where we're headed, about the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. It's just, as much as I know there are plenty of people who are struggling in various ways in the church, I think so many people I talk to are struggling faithfully and are being helped by the church and are in that way kind of helping us. We get to grow by watching God be faithful in their lives and them be faithful to him in the midst of what they're going through. And in the midst of all of that, I just feel like, wow, what a great church community we have, and what a great, what an exciting time to be here and to be moving in the direction we're moving. So that was the impression I was left with over the summer.
And I think it's always, as pastors, anytime anyone asks me how's the church doing, it's always like a mixture, right? Like there's a lot of stuff that's really hard. A lot of people are out there going through really difficult things. I mean, even with Pastor Steven and a lot of stuff that happened. I mean, there's so much up and down, so many things to celebrate, so many things that are hard. But at the end of the day, I think you're right, Brian. Just the faithfulness of people, even in hard situations and hard circumstances, I'm really overwhelmed as well. Gratitude for everything God's doing in the lives of so many people.
That's so cool.
I don't want to give like an overly rosy picture.
No,
That's
no,
right.
Totally. Yeah. I think there's the reality of life, but then there's the kind of overarching confidence and joy that we both in the Lord and then in the working out of that in the context of the church. That's super encouraging. How's your family doing?
My family's pretty good.
Yeah.
Everyone's slowly aging. This is for us. This is the beginning of the birthday season. So all of our birthdays for all 7 of us are packed into one 4.5 month period.
When's your birthday, Brian?
My birthday is December 1st.
December 1st.
Yeah,
Matt has a calendar reminder the day before.
Every year, it says it's for the last probably 10 to 12 years. It said on my calendar, Brian's lame birthday, December 1st.
And it's my fault for bringing this up because I have a reminder on my calendar every year about 6 days before my birthday that says Matt talks about his calendar saying Brian's lame birthday.
And now
I ruined it.
And now I'm going to add a yearly reminder of Brian talks about it 7 days before your birthday.
That being said, so there's
so you're entering birthday season.
Remember all of the holidays we put in a nice 5-month period in our home, including 3 of people in my family have the same birthday on January 11th. Which is kind of crazy. So that's a day. But no, everyone's doing well right now. Everyone's relatively healthy. Kids are in school and doing all that stuff. It was an enjoyable summer overall, to kind of be together. And I think as, not everyone has kids, but those that do, I think will eventually experience, if they haven't yet, kind of the different dynamics of kids as they age and the different ways you relate to them and the different ways it kind of affects you and your life, both pragmatically and kind of personally as a parent. And so we're kind of stretching this Ben's 4.5, Quinn's going to be 13. In a few months. That's kind of that range that we're in right now. So we're kind of experiencing a lot of those different things. And you guys have told me on the way in that, it's one thing to have kids that are very small and there's a lot of care required. There's also a lot of cuteness. It's kind of the idea is you're taking videos all the time and they're taking their steps and saying their words and stuff. But it's a different and not worse thing that happens as they get older, where you relate to them in a different way and they become sort of people with their own personalities and their own opinions and thoughts in their own right, and you get to engage with them at that level. I've been really enjoying that. So it's been really great.
That's so cool. So aside from 1 Corinthians and now getting into Psalms, what have you been reading, or what's the Lord been teaching you?
Oh man. I've been reading somewhat widely and not as much as I would like to, given kind of some of the extra stuff I was doing over the summer. I think the thing that I've been doing more over the last few months is I changed up my kind of Bible reading and prayer routine. And it's funny saying that, everyone's listening. Like, oh, the pastor, like you're paid to do that. It's like, the truth is that it very easily gets crowded out in the midst of all the logistics that we have. We are not in that. Yes, at some level we can read the Bible on company time in that sense, but it's not that different substantially from, I think, anyone working a job or raising kids in the midst of the flurry of all the needs and demands and interruptions. And I found myself needing something kind of more robust than I had. And so what and I hesitate to do this because I don't want to I'm not like a litmus
Brian's
test
Bible reading plan.
That's right.
It's coming out on, in bookstores near you.
No, dude, no need for qualification. It's just helpful to
Well,
get
it's just one of
eyes
those things
into
where it's
what
like,
are you
look,
doing? What are you doing?
some people are going to read for 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's what they can find, and there's a way that's really good for them. For others, there's all our situations determine these things.
Totally.
But for me, I feel like I needed something more robust and kind of more than once a day. And so I've actually got this is not novel. The Book of Common Prayer, which has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, has a 30-day psalm reading cycle. So basically, you go through the whole book of Psalms in 30 days. There's a morning and an evening portion. And so what I've started to do is either in the morning, right when I wake up, or a little bit after, I'll read the morning Psalms. And then before I go to bed, I'll read the evening Psalms and kind of couple that with a kind of a short prayer. And then I've been reading the portions of the M'Cheyne reading plan, which takes you kind of the I guess the longer version, the easier version, I should say, the less cluttered version or crowded version, where you do the whole Bible the Old Testament in 2 years and the New Testament twice in 1 year. And so I start, like a good lapsed Bible reader, I started like the January plan, in like June or something. So I'm in Numbers right now. But I've been taking notes a little bit. I've tried to be a little more engaged with it. I think that's borne some fruit. There's a way that structuring your life a little more around times like that, not kind of putting everything into one moment of your day or one kind of portion of your day, gives you a perspective of God's involvement in your life, as it gives that perspective across your day and not just in that. You're not trying to source everything back to that one moment that you were reading, but your whole day becomes you begin, you end. There's a bit of a morning, noon, and night kind of vibe, and I found that really beneficial. And it's also been very challenging because, like I said earlier, just because we work at a church doesn't mean that we have all of this time to just sit around and pray and read the Bible. And if we weren't doing that, we'd just be sitting there. So trying to make that happen has taken a little bit of intentionality, but I've really enjoyed it. And I think it's leading me into more of the same. Like, I think I need more time to actually pray. That's a lot of reading, like I think I need a little more time for meditation and prayer in the midst of it. But it's been a great season of more robust Bible intake and covering ground, especially in the Old Testament, that it's been a long time since I've been there with intentionality. It's like Numbers is a crazy book. Like what in the world is all this? There's all these stories and there's like a bunch of laws, then more stories and more laws. And I've got some resources that I've been trying to use to help me kind of understand a little more of that, and realizing
Scott's sermon.
It's mainly Scott's one sermon from 2006 or whatever that was. Yeah, that was it.
An hour, 17 minutes, everybody.
Wandering in the wilderness, wandering in the sermon.
Wandering the wilderness.
He gave us the experience.
Yeah.
Of wandering in the wilderness. Matt will not let that one go.
Are you tired yet? Just repeating
I
over
want you
and
to
over
feel
again.
what they feel.
Of things I expected to be my most referenced sermon over the course of the last 20 years.
It's either that or Philippians 2.
It's true. But seeing how like the narrative and the laws go together, they like speak to each other. There's a reason why they're where they are. It's not just haphazard. And there's beauty in that. And there's ways it points to Christ. When you're in Numbers and you're in Hebrews, I get just like, that's really cool. You see, the thing, the high priest that Christ is in Hebrews is the one that you just read about that in the end of Leviticus or in Numbers, and their like installation and their consecration. And it reminds you of the way that God put all this together and how significant the person of Christ is in those ways. So there's a lot of really good things to that.
You know what's interesting about what I hear in you saying that is the reality that sometimes, and maybe a lot of times, a lot of that Bible study, you may not even walk away from that morning or that noon or that evening with a like specific, oh, this is the application I need for the next 3 hours. Sometimes you do, but what I hear you saying is that what happens more often is just you're getting glimpses of God. You're seeing him, you're encountering him. Your vision of him is either being shaped or maybe just reminded, right?
Mm-hmm.
That, like, these are some of the things. Is that accurate?
Yeah, that's right.
Is that,
I personally, and speak very personally, I tend to bounce around in needs. There are times that I really need to go back to what I was taught when I was in like youth group in high school. And it's like, you read your Bible and figure out what you're supposed to do with that today. There's times I need that because I can get lost. I can kind of get a little too theoretical, a little too vague, a little too, it's just kind of out there. It's philosophical in some ways. And I really need to hear that. That's part of meditation. There are other times that I get so caught up in how it's supposed to be hitting me now that I don't make room for the idea that there is something to be said for the slow growth, the agricultural metaphor of, the seed sapling kind of, heads out of the ground, and there's slow growth over time as it expands that you don't always see if you check day after day after day. And then I think something that I was reminded of recently, I was reading an old piece by Tim Keller, an old article on prayer, and he was, in his typical kind of very concise way, was just saying, well, I do this and I do this and I think about this, think about that, and sometimes, you feel it and sometimes you don't, and that's fine. Because it wasn't about that anyway. And that's a helpful reminder for me too. Is the reason we read Scripture is to encounter God. There are also very significant ways that you don't always feel that way, and that's fine. Because you don't need to make excuses for it or rationalize it or say you really were experiencing Him when you feel like you weren't, and here's why. We can do that, but the main point is you're there to worship, you're there to listen, you're there to read, and God will do what He does. And as long as you're showing up with clear eyes and an intentional heart, or even half of those things, God loves to show grace. And so that's been helpful for me too. So the big answer is yes to all of those things. And I think I've been trying to find my way to putting them all together in different combinations over the last few months, to make sure that at my age and my level of development that I'm being intentional at pursuing those things myself and not just, talking about them on Sunday mornings or in some other venue.
That's so rich. I'm so thankful for both of you sharing that, because it's number one, I think it's a huge encouragement to know that kind of both intentionality and that kind of growth, like the Lord's doing that kind of growth in our pastors, and in all of us. And it also, I think, reminds me and reminds us that that kind of intentionality doesn't require a sabbatical break, right? Like doesn't require, it requires some opportunity to step back, right? Think through things. But
what about you, Scott?
I don't know. It's all right. It's all right.
I mean, how do you want to do this, man?
Sounds like the Lord's doing. Yeah, I don't know. It sounds like the Lord's doing a lot of different things here. So I'm glad for that. No, I mean, obviously we had a really unique summer, and this is super encouraging to me because it gives, I think, snapshots of what He's doing, how He's working in not only each one of our lives, but in the church as a whole. And I think for me and for our family, it was obviously a very unique summer, and one that I think powerful enough and significant enough in my heart and life that there are aspects of it that are really hard to put into words, that are hard to describe. But some of the ways that we've been trying to do that, first of all, I mean, as I would assume most people know at this point, we took the first half of that sabbatical and drove to Alaska, and drove around Alaska and did some camping and did all sorts of things. And honestly, it was incredible. Like it really was. It was and I think that there's a lot of different ways we could describe it, and I could geek out for you about the geography of it, or the nature of it, or the different
maybe if you're
animals.
interested in that, follow up with Scott personally.
Exactly. There's lots of moosing, lots of moose.
More than
Meese.
you expected.
Meese. Lots of that was actually less than I expected.
Less? What was the thing? It was more.
There was
Mountains.
There were more
Trees?
There were more glaciers.
Glaciers. That's what it was.
There were way more glaciers than I expected, particularly on the drive up, like through British Columbia, through the Yukon. It was that was stunning, and it was kind of crazy. But as we reflect on that, the way Laura actually describes it, that I've just kind of glommed onto, because I think the simplest way she puts it is, it was just a really sweet time for our family. Again, and it really was. And that doesn't mean that, everything was perfect over 6 weeks, right? You crammed 6 of us into a car for 6 weeks, and there's just the normal human dynamics and interaction at work, for sure. At the same time, I think as we all look back on it, it's an amount of time that I was able to just focus on and invest in my kids that I haven't spent that extended amount of time just focused on my kids, probably in their lives. And that was, that's really unique. It's really rich, particularly at this time and at this moment when Harper's going into his senior year of high school and doing the whole college app thing and all that. And so that was really sweet. It was some really quality time in nature. There is something unique about just getting out of the city and being surrounded by man created things, and just being surrounded by things that God created. There's a size, there's a glory, there's a uniqueness, there's a complexity that nothing man-made or nothing in the city can ever rival. And that was soul stirring, soul filling in some really, really significant ways.
You mean to tell me that Los Angeles sidewalks don't have the same impact on you as the backcountry of Alaska?
Not quite.
Okay.
Not quite.
I feel like I'm struggling a little bit to understand that, but
but you can imagine that somebody might.
I can
feel
imagine
that
that someone might feel that way.
So I will say, though, that is also coupled with after that time, and particularly as we headed home and as we drove down and back into the United States, and then kind of south down. We basically came down the 5. We went up through the Canadian Rockies, kind of by Calgary, up through Montana, by Calgary and Banff and Jasper, and up that direction. And then we came back down more toward the coast through Vancouver and Seattle and Portland and everything. And as we came back down, there was just a palpable excitement to not only be back home, but to be in our city. I think that there's we got asked multiple times, like after being gone from LA and in, the God's creation for that long, like, how are you ever going to come back? And honestly, that wasn't the hard part. Like, coming back was not the hard part. And now there's a unique beauty there for sure. But we love the city. We love these people. And this is absolutely home. And that was also a really sweet and unique experience. I didn't know how that was going to affect my whole family, to be honest. Right. I'm like, I know we're called here. Is it going to be like pulling teeth to, drive back into town? But it was exactly the opposite. Like, it was really
talk
sweet.
To me about that. 'Cause I think there's a lot of people who are listening who cannot imagine what you just said. And not to cast any slight at them. I just think there's just genuinely a lot of people are going, that's really cool that you're that weird. Like, like you were out in freedom and nature and you came back to a city and gridlock and like more than just that it happened and that you were like happy with it. How would you maybe try and explain it to someone who's sort of like, I don't get that at all. This place is not nearly as cool as everywhere else. I'm kind of stuck here. How would you try and help them understand it maybe a little more than they can from what you just said?
I'd start by praying for them. I don't know. I mean, in one sense, I don't know, but I will say, I'll tell you maybe some of the thoughts that like contribute to that, because it's more than just like some masochistic love for traffic.
Well, and the prayer is helpful because what you mean, I think, is you're acknowledging the difficulty of a place like this.
For sure.
I get why you feel the way you feel.
For sure. So number one, I think that there's number one that I think that is put into the context of a little bit of understanding places and knowing places for all the aspects of them, and not just for the idealistic aspects of them. I think every place has strengths. I'm not saying that every place is as easy to live, but every place has blessings and difficulties. Alaska was amazing. Alaska's dark and frozen 9 months of the year. And that's not when I was there. Right? So like there's a lot of people who have a really, really hard time living most of the year in Fairbanks. Just like there's a lot of people who have a really, really hard time living in Los Angeles, right? So I think there's an easy way to be like, oh my gosh, I was there for a week and it was sunny and it was amazing. And so that's one piece of it. Second of all, I think there is a unique beauty in creation. There absolutely is. And I think that it's a balm to my soul in a number of different ways. There's also a unique beauty and glory in a amalgamation of image bearers. Like as impressive as a bunch of trees next to each other are, like hundreds and thousands and hundreds of thousands of image bearers next to each other are more complex and amazing and beautiful and awe-inspiring to me than 100,000 trees. Part of it's the complexity, and I think part of that is also seeing people as image bearers, and I think that that manifests in all sorts of different ways. That manifests in the variety of cultures in our midst, that manifests in the variety of experiences and backgrounds and stories and interactions, that as beautiful as wilderness is actually devoid of that. And I think that our flesh wants to make one better and one worse. Like our flesh wants me to convince you that the city's better and the wilderness isn't as good. Or that the rural context, sweeping hills, is better because the city is bad. But I don't think that's how God views His world. And increasingly, I guess increasingly, I don't view the world that way either. And so when I drive into the city, I simultaneously am not like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I'm back in civilization where I don't have to, camp and sleep on the floor. Like for this to be beautiful, I don't have to denigrate where I just came from. Mm-hmm. And for what I just came from to be amazing, I don't have to denigrate where I'm coming home to. And I think that there's a lot of the things that make our ideas about place complicated are oftentimes narratives that we imbibe, or even narratives that we tell ourselves that may reflect some genuine difficulties, but are never the whole story.
Okay, so we can't camp here, but
No,
two
I
interesting
know.
things that came out of what you just said.
Camp here like he did in Alaska.
Exactly right. Pun intended. One is the fascinating fact that I've never thought about before you just said it, that the pinnacle of creation and therefore the pinnacle of nature is human beings.
Yes.
And so the idea that a place with a lot of human beings is a place devoid of nature, I understand what people are saying by that. And I feel it myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a sense in which the buildings and the technology feel like they're impeding the massiveness of the created world in a way that kind of skews your vision a little bit.
Yeah.
But I've never once treated that with the idea that, well, I actually am around the pinnacle of nature and a lot more of it. The second thing that strikes me is that you're saying that in order to have a real home somewhere, you have to actually kind of be a sojourner. Like you cannot have
exactly
a place of perfection or a place of utopia on the earth if you want to have a real home here.
Yeah.
Because to do that is to make one a hero and one a villain, is to make one an ideal and one, a thing to be avoided at all costs. And because we don't have a permanent home here in the biblical sense, you're able to go, I can see the good things where I was and really enjoy them and appreciate them. I can see the good things where I am and really enjoy them and appreciate them without this added burden of making them a place where I can plant all of my roots, not just in this time of my life, but, across eternity.
Yeah.
I think that's really fascinating and very, very helpful. So thank you for taking my ad hoc question.
Totally. And I mean, maybe just the last little piece I'd say there is, I think there's also, and this goes back to the prayer. Like, I think there's also a spiritual, just unique component to that. Like, I think part of that love and affection comes from the fact that I believe with all my heart the Lord's called us here now. And I think he engenders affection along with that in ways that I could try to give you reasons or I could try to explain, but I'm not sure it's completely explainable. And that's okay too.
There's Chrissy says something. She grew up in LA and she says, you have to love it to hate it. I think it's just the perfect, because there are plenty of times that she just gets so annoyed at the city, and I do too. I think everyone does at various times, but she has this thing where it's like, but it has to be yours, but it's sort of like no one can pick on my brother but me kind of a thing. It has to really be yours. And in that sense, that calling can make it yours. If you embrace that, you're able to really see the bad sides too.
Yeah.
But man, it's yours. So you love it. So you can hate it every once in a while if you want to.
Yeah.
It's not Pollyanna-ish. It's very honest.
Totally.
But that makes it very real.
Totally.
Okay. Anyway, continue.
So that was kind of the first half of my sabbatical time. And the second half, after we got home, I mean, really quickly, like within a week, the kids were going back to school. Laura was going back to work. And I had another 6 weeks for more kind of introspective and deep study thought, like the type of work that I didn't have on this trip. But and so I did some of that time was just like investing in both the family and relationships here. Some of that time I pulled away as just solo time. I took a couple of different weeks, just really kind of on my own to do some deep study and reading. And that was really, really, really sweet. I'm trying to, I love talking about this. I love talking about what the Lord does. I love what the Lord talking about. I oftentimes, like, I want to have like a Jeopardy board when I'm having conversations with people. I'm like, I don't know. Like, you asked me, how was it? I'm like, I don't know. Like, I want you to pick a category. Like, tell me a story about glaciers. Like, tell me a story about trees, or tell me a story about, God's provision, or tell me a story, right? Like, there's just, but he's just been so active and so present around every turn. And I feel like he's been teaching me some things and showing me some things that in a really surprising way. I think that there are even, I think, aspects to the Christian life, rhythms that we're in. I feel bad talking about this in generalities, but I don't want to like scare anybody. But like part of it's like fasting. Honestly, one of the big topics I looked at was Sabbath, and what is Sabbath rest, and what does that look like here. And I mentioned that, and I guess I hesitate to mention it because I think when people hear Sabbath, they kind of go one of two directions, right? Either like that doesn't really have anything to do with me, or if it does, it's going to be oppressive, right? And I think there's a lot to unpack there, both in my own head and what the Lord's been teaching me about regular rhythms and life, and even life in the city, and how we live and function in light of God and in light of the dynamics and technologies around us. I feel like he just took me on a deep dive and made some surprising turns that I just didn't see coming, whether it's like kind of theologically or even practically in my own heart. And we've talked about this a couple of times. I could go in and we could talk about that. I'm sure I'll share some of that in good time. But the thing that stood out to me wasn't even what he taught me, but how he was teaching me. Because I think that when there's been this part of my expectation and maybe my spiritual life that even in light of the grace of God's grace, in light of his gospel, in light of all of his goodness, and a conviction that only grace motivates change, I think there's still been this perspective, maybe this fear in me that if God were going to come and correct me, if he was going to teach me something, it was probably with an exasperated tone. He was probably like, man, I mean, it's been 42 years. You haven't gotten it. Can we please like see this now and move on? Because I don't know quite how you've missed it this far, but you have, and now I'm going to teach you, and then life's going to be better. It'll be good. Just like, come on, man. And it sounds dumber when I say it out loud, because that doesn't sound much like Jesus. But it sure feels that way. But I think as he's been correcting and teaching and directing me in this period, I've been surprised by and overcome by his kindness, his patience, and not an exasperated patience, but an eager patience, an eagerness that's not like, how did you miss this? But like, oh man, I want to show you something more. Like, I want to show you something more. And not a frustration that I didn't get it yet, but a grace-filled understanding of my finiteness, of my continued need for sanctification, continued need for learning, and just a very gentle, fatherly direction is, I think, how I'd probably describe that. And that I was surprised at how surprising that was to me, if I could say it that way. And feel like he's just kind of invited me into another season of learning and growing. I kind of wished I'd come back from sabbatical with like 5 lessons, and I'd be like, okay, here they are. I learned X, Y, and Z, and they have changed my life in these 3 ways. But what he's doing is just, it's bigger than that. It can't be reduced to that. It's bigger than that in time. I feel like he's just getting started in one sense. It's also bigger than that in scope. Like the work, when God works in our hearts and transforms us, even just, like, every bit of transformation explodes with implications throughout our lives. Like, there's not just like one lesson. It's not like, oh, okay, I'll drive differently now. Right. Like, it shapes our driving and our parenting and our friendship and our relationships and our prayer and our, work. And it explodes with meaning as God transforms us bit by bit. And, it was really humbling to continue. It's been really humbling to continue to experience that. I think that there was a part of me that over the last few years just felt a little bit, I don't want to overstate it, but just felt a little bit like colder and kind of settled in, and like, okay, the Lord's like taught me all the big things, and now I guess we'll just keep chipping away at the corners. for the rest of the life, but this is smaller work, but that's okay. And I feel like, I guess the last piece I'll say to that is someone asked me years ago, looking at our church with just so many older believers who were thriving in a number of different ways. And they said, I feel like I have trouble with people that are older in my church. Like how do you measure maturity in people who are older? And I was thinking of people, like grandparent age and things like that. Like how do you measure maturity? As I thought about it, I was like looking around our church and I was like, what stands out to me? And I realized that those that you're like, oh my goodness, that person has incredible spiritual maturity. Like I want to be like them. It wasn't a Bible knowledge thing. And it wasn't a like hours of service in the church thing. It was that at 60, at 70, at 80, they were still changing. They were still learning and growing and like changing in real ways, right? Like not just, like they were, God was showing himself to them and it was shaping their life, continuing to shape their life. And so, I mean, how much more at 42? Like how much more at 42? And so I feel like the Lord has just both given me a vision for that and an experience of it and reminded me that we don't have to settle to just kind of like nibble around the corners for the rest of your life. He's got work to do because I'm not that sanctified. There's still a lot of work to do. And to know him is an eternal endeavor. And so there's still really big things to learn and to understand and to see. And so I feel like I've come out of this time both with a peace and contentment about just a real confidence in him and the work that he's doing and an excitement for what he's got next. And even if I don't fully see it or know exactly what's there. So I don't know. I know we've had a number of conversations, but I don't know if that does justice to it, but that's at least what comes to my mind right now.
It's a pretty fantastic summary.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard, of course, it's hard to encapsulate everything that God's teaching you.
Totally.
But it's a really beautiful summary, Scott.
And actually, I want to share it that way because especially for anyone who listens to this and listens this far into the podcast, I just want you to know that that's what's going on in my heart when I say thank you. Like when I say thank you for the gift to me and to my family of this time, which, wasn't required. You didn't have to do, but both you guys as a staff doing that, but even just the church, our church family's eagerness to send an excitement. I haven't once felt bad or guilty for having that time. And I actually think that most pastors, that's why they're afraid to take sabbaticals. They're afraid to take sabbaticals because they're afraid their church is going to make them feel bad or guilty for doing it. They're afraid of the attitude of like, well, that would be nice, Pastor. I guess, you get to, all we've felt is just a sweet eagerness for us. And so in sharing that, I want the church to hear what's behind our thankfulness for the gift of this time, because it really was a gift.
I think it's really powerful. The last thing you said will trouble a decent amount of people because in seminary, we had a professor one time and he said, the biggest problem for most of you won't be that you're going to try and take power that doesn't belong to you. For most of you, the biggest problem is going to be people are going to try and give you power that doesn't belong to you. And you might take it. Like it's not so much that you're going to show up and try and take it's that people actually want you to have it. And I'm not speaking about our church really by any stretch.
Yeah.
But I thought that was really insightful, even into my own heart, in that what you think you want is someone who has kind of cracked the upper hemisphere and now has all the answers. Like they've arrived.
Yeah.
And at some level you think, well, that's the pastors. And especially if you're younger than us, you think, oh, cool. So one day I will arrive too. And better than to say it out loud, But what you mean is one day I'll have the major stuff kind of all right, and everything else will be just kind of finishing out the logical conclusions of what's already been started, you know? That there won't be any real new lessons, just applying of old lessons. And I think that is what you feel like you want, because, you know, it's like there's a sense of safety in that, in the idea that one day I too will be able to not have to lean on the Lord for the things that I need. One day I too will be able to, you know, to borrow a phrase, I too will be completing by the flesh what was begun by the Spirit, you know, like,
Yeah.
and to hear, I think it's both a little challenging, but really refreshing to hear a pastor who just had a sabbatical not come back with a bunch of fresh answers, not come back realizing my whole life is a mess. You know, it turns out I'm not above reproach, but actually having a sense of like, no, my character is what it is by the grace of God. He has taught me lessons that I can stand on. I'm qualified to be a pastor by my own assessment and the assessment of the other pastors around me. So there's reality there. And simultaneously, God is still, you know, taking a jackhammer to all sorts of things in my life.
Totally.
And that's not going to stop anytime soon.
Yeah.
It really takes the weight off your shoulders of expecting to finally get it right, in quotes. And realize that getting it right without quotes is simply, it really is leaning on the Lord. It really is following the Spirit. It really is just learning more and more in an interior way to, you know, follow after him in those movements of soul that you have throughout the day and throughout your life. I think that's a really beautiful thing. And that is the kind of reminder that we all need. And in some ways, it can take the kind of step out of a sabbatical to really get that sense in its fullness. And for you to step back in, it helps me. I think it helps us as pastors. It helps our church community to remember that that's what we're here to do. We're not here to arrive. We're here to follow. And following happens over a long period of time. And you never like decide to follow less because you're closer. You just kind of keep going.
Yeah.
And I think that there's such a beauty to that, because it really does allow us to let go of the control in the ways that we want to take it poorly.
Yeah.
And just be able to say, the Lord will do what he will do, and we will chase after him. And he's chasing after us more the whole time.
Yeah.
And let's just kind of let that keep going.
Yeah. Oh man. That's such a both great summary and I think great helpful observation. It's so encouraging. And I think the last thing I'll say is for those that do hear that and are like, man, I wish I could get that kind of distance to see that or appreciate that. And I think, number one, I think the Lord provides that in a number of different ways, and it comes in all sorts of different shapes and sizes and life stages. And I don't think there's another time in my life where I'll ever have this same type of time. Even if I have another sabbatical. My last sabbatical wasn't like this. I had young kids. It was very different. But I'm just gonna plant a seed that I think the Lord has provided a means of that for all of us, whatever your vocation, whatever your calling is. And it's called Sabbath. And there's a lot to be explored there. But one of the things that has excited me the most is that I've realized that word's not scary. There's a lot of richness and beauty in it as we explore. So I hope to talk some more about that.
Yeah, maybe another podcast. You can do Sabbath reflections with Scott.
Yeah.
Like, not sabbatical, but Sabbath.
Yeah. But I think that's all we got for now. The next, we're going to follow this up pretty quickly with a more extended interview with Stephen and Alina Sato as well, and get to just hear from some more from them about how the Lord's been working over their summer, because I mean, obviously everybody got an update last Sunday or the Sunday before, and man, the Lord's been doing some incredible work there too. It's been really, really incredible and special to see. So, yeah, well, maybe just one last time, thank you all for the gift of this summer to me, and not just to me, to my family. What was one of the things that was really interesting too is that Laura felt like this was a sabbatical for her. Her employment didn't change, but it was significant enough for our family that she feels like she received a sabbatical. And that's the fact that she feels that is an incredible gift from the church to me and to her. And thanks to you guys for covering and for the extra work on
Covering
your end.
everything but the Pastor's podcast while he was gone.
Well, you know, you can't do it all.
The re-releases.
You can't do
going.
it all.
We got the
That's right.
re-releases.
That's right. So thank you guys. Thank you, church. We love you. We're so thankful for you. And I'm back. So I will definitely see you on Sunday.